One's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing. So, welcome again to the Profitable Photographer. And please, 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 please subscribe, share with your friends. It helps everybody. And if you want to chat with me about anything, as always, you can go to lucydumascoaching.com. Now, today's conversation is going to be about photographing on location. And I encourage you to, of course, look up the website and all the things for my guest today, but also lucydumas.com is my website. And my guest and I actually have a lot in common. So we'll get into that more. She travels more than I have for photography clients, but we love on location photography. So let's welcome Denise Watrous.
Yes,
Hello.
hello. I'm glad to be here.
So, me too. I, there's an old comedian thing that would say, I'm excited to be anywhere." So, yes, we're excited.
True, true.
All right, let me tell you about this lovely lady. She's a Professional Photographers of America CPP, certified professional photographer. She's from Waukesha,
Waukesha.
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 Wisconsin. She was Senior Portrait of the Year in Wisconsin. She specializes in destination portraits. She loves to capture unique moments against breathtaking backgrounds around the world. And she has an eye for seeing or creating perfect light. That's one of the things we have in common, and is a great storyteller. She makes sure to combine the clothing, location, and posing to tell that story. And let's see, that's all the things. There's so much more into that.
All of the
All the things. I love that expression. Okay, so I'd love to know just a little short, like cliff notes about your background. I know you've been doing photography a long time professionally and started your own studio eventually. But like how did you get started? Or first of all, how did you get excited about photography?
So create like literally in first grade, I knew all I ever wanted to do in the entire world was be a photographer and be a mom. So I
Oh,
went, I'm both. Being a photographer is the only thing in the world I ever wanted to do.
wow.
So I did.
Do you know how you even knew there was such a job
I
or
do. So, it was the 70s. There was no art program in public schools in the 70s. So we had a mom that once a month would bring a project for the kids to do for art. And Mrs. Harney was our mom, and she had the overhead projector, and we were going to do a pointillism project. And she put on the overhead projector Georges Seurat's Sunday in the Park, the very
mm,
famous. Everybody knows one Ferris Bueller's looking at. Um, and I remember sitting on my pink carpet square thinking it was the most, I literally still get choked up thinking about it. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen.
mm,
And I remember thinking, I don't think I could paint like that. I don't think I could draw like that. But I bet I could take a picture like that.
mm.
And that was it. From that moment on, I wanted to be a photographer. I begged my parents for a camera for Christmas. And those of you that are old enough to know will know I got a 110 camera with a flash cube
Yeah.
and 2 rolls of 12 exposure film that I had literally used by the end of Christmas Day. And that was that. That was all it took.
And the rest is history.
The
Um,
rest is history.
s- so did you do photography in high school? Were you on yearbook or
So I
anything?
was on yearbook. So there was no photography project at my or class at my high school. That wasn't a thing yet in the 80s, early 90s. Sorry, by the way, if you hear noise. Apparently today is the one day they decide to do construction outside my studio.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries.
they never tell me these things.
Zoom filters out pretty well, so I can't hear it.
Perfect. So there was no photography class in my high school. I was on yearbook back when I was in high school, being on the yearbook staff was a club. It was an after school thing. Nowadays, it's a class, at least in schools in my area.
Hmm.
But it wasn't a class back then. So yes, I was on yearbook. Um, there wasn't too much actual photography involved with that. It was more, laying out the pages, cropping images. Again, that was, there were film and negatives and actual prints. That it was a very, very different process. When I tell kids about it now, they look at me like,
Yeah.
what? You didn't do it on the computer?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I actually, oh, go ahead.
So I was editor of my yearbook, and I was intimidated by the photography. And sadly, have you ever heard of Philip Charis? He's one of the most famous portrait photographers. Uh, he opened a studio in Pasadena where he specialized in beautiful, fancy clothes, like looked like paintings from another era. But before he started doing that, he was our high school yearbook photographer. But the
Oh,
year I was editor, we couldn't afford him anymore. So sadly, we got this not very good company. Anyway, so yeah, that experience of cropping and layout and storytelling and all of that definitely builds those neuro pathways that pay off in the
absolutely.
long run. I think a lot of photographers were on yearbook staff at some point in their life. So, okay, so I know that in the 80s, you got a very special job with a very special company. Tell me about that.
I did. So, well, actually, so my very, very first photography job, I've actually in my entire life, I will be 51 in December. I have never had a non-photography related job
Wow.
ever. Um, my very, very first job in 1988 was taking pictures of kids with Santa, which don't do that. Kids hate Santa. It was not fun, but literally within the years that I was in high school, I worked for Olin Mills, the huge chain that I don't think they exist too much anymore. Actually, I don't know if they exist at all. But while I was in high school, I was actually a regional trainer for Olin Mills.
Mm,
And as we chatted about, they were very, very regimented in their position one, position two, position three, position four. And if it was a single child or a group of 17, everything that they did was based off of those positions. And it's where I learned about composition and posing,
mm.
which I think are some of my strongest points. So people like to knock Olin Mills, and yeah, it was cheesy and the old master's canvas, but they had a very, very strong training program. And I'm very thankful for the time I spent working there. I learned a
Sure.
lot.
And you learn sales,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Well, I was a photographer, so they like I did the photography, and then we had a salesperson. I did learn some about sales, but I wasn't a salesperson for Olin Mills. But
got it.
um,
Okay,
I learned
so
a lot.
your passion, so you started your business in the early 2000s, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've owned my own studio since 2001.
Okay. Which honestly, and people that listen regularly know that I sometimes get out my violin and talk about how this was a man's world uh,
Oh, it
in the first
was.
half of my career. And the early 2000s is when there were some superstars in the industry in PPA like Lori Nordstrom and Sarah Petty. Um, and a lot of women started their careers realizing, oh my gosh, we can do this too. And I actually, if they hadn't invented the auto exposure where you put it on shutter or aperture priority, I probably never would have become a professional because all the technology just scared the heck out of me. So I admire you that although our little 110s didn't take much technology, but
Well, I was a film photographer for. I was probably one of the last holdouts in Milwaukee to switch to digital. I didn't go full digital until 2007. I loved my Mamiya in the studio. I had Hasselblads that I took on location or shot
mhm.
weddings with. So I am a film girl at heart. It was a very hard transition for me. I don't like change. I did not want to go digital. I knew film very well.
Yeah.
So
So
it was
I'm the
hard.
same. I was the last person in California, the professional photographers in California. And people were like, you got to change, you got to change. And they'd show me their prints, and I'd remember what the film ones looked like. And I'd be like, no, especially on location. I knew my settings. I knew that how what I see, the lab was going to be able to print it because I'd developed a relationship where they understood my printing preferences. And not until Canon came out with the 28 um, megapixel. So I knew because I liked the square. So I knew I could throw away half if I wanted a
Yep.
square. And also because some of my cameras broke and it was time. But yeah,
I can't remember what my first digital camera was. It was a Canon. I don't even remember. I remember selling my Hasselblads though to buy digitals
oh,
and crying.
you,
Oh,
have we been living the same life? I had, I think it was KEH was in town and they took this box full of Hasselblads and lenses and
oh,
the all the things. And I got just enough money to buy a digital camera and a lens. And
yep.
I
I
literally,
took mine to Calumet Photo in Chicago. I had
yeah,
4 Hasselblad batteries, all my 12 backs, all my 24 backs. I think I had a 120 lens, an 80, a 50,
yeah,
and I can't remember what the fourth lens was. And I think they gave me like $3,300 for all of it. And
yeah, yeah.
I can remember he
Heartbreaking.
got up to go get me a check, and I sat there just listening to it on a long exposure a couple more times, and he came in tears. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He was like, ma'am, you're not the only
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Now, the only positive for me, and we'll get into the meat of this, but I love talking to you, Denise. The only positive is my ability to focus the Hasselblads because they are not easy to focus, was getting harder,
No.
harder, and harder. And I do love the ability to zoom and go wide and go medium at will. Um, it adds so much variety to my work that without me having to run
Oh, it's
forward, run
incredible.
back, run in, run over here, find a place I can stand where I'm not going to fall in the river. Um, yeah, so there are some
When I
bonuses.
when I tell younger photographers about manual focus on a Hasselblad, and I just had a girl not long ago say, "Didn't it give you a square for the eye?" And I just laughed. Like, no, honey, there was nothing automatic to a Hasselblad.
No, not at all. Yeah, I pretty much use the 120 because kids are my specialty, the lens, and you could get close enough that they could hear you. It
Mm-hmm.
still wasn't, it was more like an 80 on a 35. So it still wasn't ideal, but yeah, that was my go-to. I also loved my Mamiya C330s. They could focus practically in the dark. They were,
Oh, they were great.
yes, I still kept those because you couldn't get any money for those. All right,
I have in my
go ahead.
basement, I have a Mamiya RV67, but no lens for it. And I
Yeah,
every now and then I'll get it out and just listen to it.
that's a good idea. I'll have to do that. Um, all right, so on location photography. So I have practical questions, but
Later.
like, what's your why with on location photography?
So my why kind of happened very organically. So I've been a photographer for a very long time. I do mostly senior portraits. So I have 3 kids. I have a big age gap. So I have my oldest daughter, and then 9 years later, almost 9 years later, I had a set of girl boy twins.
Oh, wow.
When my oldest daughter was in about 7th grade, out of nowhere, she looked at me and she said, "When it's my turn for senior portraits, can we go somewhere different?" And I said, "Different how?" And she
Mm.
said, "Just different than all your clients." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, you're my kid. Yes, we can go somewhere different. Where do you want to go?" And keep in mind, I'm from Chicago, but we live outside of Milwaukee. And she said, "I want to go to Savannah, Georgia." Now we go to South Carolina. We go to Hilton Head a lot. So
Uh-huh.
that wasn't out of. wasn't out of the ordinary. And
Hmm.
I said, yes, we can go to Savannah. So fast forward, a couple of years till it's her turn for senior portraits, and we did hers in Savannah, Georgia.
Mm.
And to me, it was just photographing my kid in Savannah because she was my kid. But suddenly I started to notice other kids and parents reacting to that.
Mm.
Now, it set two precedents. One, kids are listening and paying attention, and they were noticing, like, oh, I could go somewhere else. But it set a dangerous precedent with my twins. So when I did my oldest daughter's senior portraits, my twins were in like fourth grade, I think. And my girl twin was like, where will we do my senior portraits?
Mm.
She was already plotting. And for years, she said, I want to do my senior portraits in Paris. And I was like, we are not doing your senior portraits in Paris. No, we're going to do senior portraits in Paris. And I said, no, we're not going to do your senior portraits in Paris. And then Notre Dame burned down. And then we went to Paris and we did her senior portraits. And she won. And same thing. So then I came back to my studio and I made a beautiful, huge portrait that's still on the wall of my daughter in front of the Eiffel Tower. And it just clicked
Mm.
that you show what you sell, or you sell what you show. And
Mm-hmm.
now I had a beautiful portrait of a senior in front of the Eiffel Tower on the wall at my studio. And then for clients, it wasn't just words anymore. They could see it.
Right.
Now it was, and that right there, like, so this portrait right here, that's a Sweet 16 portrait in Nashville. And right over here, this one, that's a Sweet 16 portrait in Austin, Texas.
Mm.
Um, that's in the studio. That's here in Waukesha. But in the other rooms of my studio are mostly destination portraits because now it's real and people see it and it's not unattainable.
Right.
So you
It's
sell
well
what you
worth.
show,
Right.
and if you show it, it's real to people. It's not just talking anymore. So
Hmm.
it the why was really, I want to travel the world and I wanted to do things with my kids. And then it turned into, I want to travel the world and get paid to do it. And that's what I do.
Awesome. So I want to ask you
So,
questions because I'm sure you also do on location in town. Um,
absolutely.
one of the biggest challenges, and to me, I've seen some of my San Diego friends who love to travel, um, do a lot of destination things, but I will say that most of them don't charge enough for the travel time and effort. Um, so what's the difference if I wanted to go somewhere like New York City, we'll say,
And
instead
I
of,
actually, I just did a session in New York City not long ago.
okay, so instead of
So,
Waukesha, I want to go to New York City. So how do you price that differently? Or do you
so
do that?
I have a couple different, there's a lot you have to take into it. And I don't want to really go into like actually like the dollar amount of what I charge because everybody has to make that decision for themselves. But I think there's things that need to go into your decision of how you charge. So like if I'm going to New York City, it's really big. I don't know that we're going, first of all, you can't drive around New York City and do senior portraits. You can't park, you can't pull over, get out, shoot, get back. That's not a thing. So for what I want to do to create a kind of session that I want a client to have, it's going to take 2 days, maybe 3. So that's 3 days that I'm away from my studio, plus a travel day on each end.
Right.
Um, so what is it worth? What is your day rate? So I'm going to charge them, the days that I'm away from my studio. They're going to pay for my flights. They're going to pay for my hotel. I don't really get too much into like, oh my gosh, you have to pay for every meal and every this, because
Mhm.
honestly, I'm not an inexpensive photographer. If they're already paying me for 5 days and my flights and my hotel, I can buy my own slice of New York pizza.
Right.
Um, it's coming out of what they're paying me, but um, things like when you get there, like an Uber ride from LaGuardia in New York traffic might be $80,
Right.
even if it's 3 miles, just because it takes so long. So, you know, there's so many other things that you don't want to lose money
Right.
to go do a senior portrait session or a family or whatever. So I have to look at those different things. And then my actual session fee, like my time and talent. You
Right.
know, the people that are like, all you do is click a button. That's
Yeah,
not
right.
really how it goes. So that's like if somebody calls me up and they say, we want to go here, that's how I would look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I will decide I'm going here, who wants to come?
Got it.
So if it's thing like I have another portrait event in Paris in the spring. So I was just in Paris last month. I'm going to Paris in the spring. I just made a social media post saying, your next chance for portraits in Paris, spring of 25.
Mm.
Send me a message. I booked 3 sessions in Paris within 2 days.
Wow.
So for that, that's a little different. So they're paying a very nice session fee for that day, but
Mm-hmm.
because it's multiple, not one of them is paying my flight and hotel. So it's a little different. But I think if that's something that you want to explore, everybody just needs to look at it themselves and say, okay, what works for me? How do I want to make this happen? There's no one way. There's no right or wrong way,
Right.
as long as you're not losing money.
Right. Right. And that's something
So
I really appreciate you breaking that down. Sometimes on a Facebook group that I'm active on, with a lot of people from various levels of experience and success, will say, uh, what should my how should I charge for travel, time, and mileage? Like when we have a real job where you're working for a company and maybe they send you to, I don't know, for us it might be LA, then they're going to reimburse you a certain amount for mileage. But with us, that is irrelevant. It's our business, right? I'm sure you'd agree with that. You
right,
never
correct.
charge, oh, and it's 39 cents a mile from here to
It's so
Paris.
silly.
It's a we have to think about it in an entirely different way. And I agree.
Absolutely.
When I photographed a wedding in Hawaii, right before the pandemic, uh, I needed a day to scout locations. I need
Mhm.
plus the recovery, like minimum 3 days. I think I might have charged her for four plus the travel days, and you never know if something might happen and you have to go a
Absolutely.
second day. So you got to, and then I had a minimum uh, session fee.
Mhm.
Now their other daughter got married in Switzerland and in January. So I charged more because I already know the location in Hawaii. I've stayed
Right.
in that area, coincidentally, that was really close to where the wedding and the reception were. But uh, at that point, they just weren't up for, I think I quoted like 20,000 or something like that. And by that time, they were just like, no. So I helped her find a photographer who sent me the raw, and I
Oh,
did everything because I've been photographing this family since the kids were first communion, 7 years old. So,
right. A long time.
but yeah, I wasn't, if it had been Switzerland in May, I would have done a lower bid because I would have wanted to go to Switzerland in May. So I get it.
Absolutely.
There's
Like,
factors.
and I think like, I don't necessarily have one hard and fast way of doing it. So, like last July, I did a 15th anniversary portrait in Glacier National Park.
Mm,
And that's a completely different animal than New York City or Paris or Austin. It's very remote. It's for that couple, and they have taken me, we've gone to the South Dakota Badlands. We've gone to Marco Island in Florida, where they want to go to Germany soon. They take me on lots of destinations. They are
Nice.
one of my favorite clients. I told her, okay, you're going to put this much down. And it was a lot. Thank God for American Express. And I said, I'm going to price it out a couple different ways. Like, for me, I was like, okay, if I fly to Montana, I still have to rent a car. I mean, Glacier National Park has a window of good weather. It's like this.
Right.
So everything is ridiculously expensive. So I priced it out, me driving to Montana and staying in hotels during the drive, or flying, renting a car, and doing all of that. And my husband and I figured out it's going to be a better deal for her and us, and from a gear standpoint, to just drive. So we drove to Montana.
Wow.
So I told her, you're going to put this much down. I am going to take, however many days, however many hotels, and my session fee and whatever else we agreed on out of that. When it's done and I'm back in Wisconsin and we look at your portraits, if you owe more, you owe more. If there's anything left from your deposit, I will just apply it to your order. Because it was hard to get to Glacier. It took me 3 days to get to Glacier. Hotels, I stayed at a Best Western for $400 a night at a Best Western, because again, their tourist season is this long and they're going to cash in.
Right.
So she put many $1,000s down, and in the end, and I kept every receipt of everything and this and that to prove to her, because I would never want my clients to be like, oh, you took advantage. Not that these clients would, but I keep every receipt, and they owed money at the end because it was, but then she still, on top of that, spent 5 figures on the most incredible album of her glacier portraits that you've ever seen.
I can just imagine.
So
I
it was
love
a lot. It was a lot of money, but
I love how you're expanding people's brains of what's possible. When
I love it.
when people
And
say,
also, and if you're going to shoot in a national park, there's so much more that goes into that. Do you need a permit? What? So in Glacier National Park, there's only one road that goes through it, and you need a reservation. And it's like buying Taylor Swift tickets. You're not going to get a reservation. So then I had to figure out, okay, I have to be in Glacier National Park before 6 a.m. to get in there without this reservation. There's a lot of planning that goes into, and you have to charge a lot, because I spent hours and hours and hours planning months before I even
it's a huge
left my driveway.
Yeah, it's like when people are doing a movie, it's very expensive for them to plan locations. And my cute little house was used in a commercial once, and there's a guy in town whose job is to scout locations. And there are 3 houses. I live in a historic neighborhood just up from downtown San Diego, and it was a commercial about a starter home, realtors, and there was so much that went into that. And we're not like, we don't have a crew of 10 people following in a truck with all the lighting equipment. I couldn't believe the lighting equipment they set up just for one person standing in front of my house. I could have done it much simpler. But so that brings me to, let's talk about lighting and how you handle it. All the things. I'm guessing you see light and you find light. You don't just bring light. But can we talk about your approach?
I do both. So a lot of it depends on where am I going. So like when I was in Glacier, I brought lighting with light stands. But my husband was with me. So I knew that I have a dedicated, let's face it, you're on a mountain. You can't put a light stand on a mountain. It's not really level. But I knew I would have my husband with me to hold or help, whatever. Um, New York City, or actually, like I'm about 2 hours outside of Chicago. I do a lot of destination sessions actually in Chicago. Um, because I'm from Chicago, it's not really a destination for me, but it is for
Mhm.
my clients. I'm not going to be walking around downtown Chicago or downtown New York City with light stands. One, as soon as you put a light stand on a sidewalk, you draw attention to yourself, either from someone that wants to give you a ticket or from someone that's just looking to do something bad. So I don't carry light stands. They're cumbersome walking through crowds. I don't need any of that. Um, so on location, I just have just a Godox AD 200. I have a handle that screws into it on the bottom. Mom is my light girl. I
Mhm.
will say, Mom, stand right here, put the light here, put the light here, whatever. And Mom is my light stand. I always, always, always have a parent of a parent. It's always been a parent. A parent, I would take a grandparent, an older sibling. Somebody is always with us for, again, a multitude of reasons. One, security, like not security, but if I'm out with somebody's minor child, someone else is going to be there.
Right.
So I bring lighting. Traveling abroad with all of my gear and lighting can be a pain, but like when I go to Paris, or I was just in London, or when I go to Canada, or I had a shoot in Cabo earlier this year, I take 2 bodies and 2 lenses and a flash unit. Because if you take more than that, going through customs, they get a little sketchy.
Mhm.
So that's what I take. I have a roller bag full of gear, and knock on wood, it has served me well. I've never needed more than that.
Right. One of the positives about going digital is getting through security. Oh my gosh.
So much easier.
I
So
I
much easier.
went to Europe once, and the only place that they would not hand inspect my film was in London, and I hadn't even gone outside. I got off a plane, and then there was security to get on the next plane. But I'd packed a lead bag, and I insisted they don't run it through straight, but they put each
Mm-hmm.
brick of film in there. They were not happy, but I just patiently said, I'm not in a hurry.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. So, yeah, the stress is much lower. So,
Oh, it's
there
so much easier.
is that.
But
So,
yeah, if you're going through customs with a lot of gear can get dicey. And I have researched a lot about what's the threshold to where customs doesn't want to, well, and if you take much more than that, you might run the risk of having to pay taxes on it.
right.
There's a lot of red tape. So I take only what I need to take that gets me through
So, what percentage of the time in most situations would you say you use your light of any kind?
all the time.
Or so you're not finding light as much as you're finding location with the light you want for the location, then lighting the subject. Is that what I'm hearing?
Nope. I always use flash. I very, very, very rarely shoot anything natural light.
Interesting.
Um, only if I mean, the only times that I really shoot something natural light is usually if I'm in a city and I find just some really fantastic light patterns and shadows created by buildings that, in my opinion, really go with an outfit or can really enhance it. Otherwise, I am an off-camera flash gal.
Mm,
Everything on my walls, everything on my Instagram, it's all off-camera
interesting.
flash.
Wow. That surprises me because you do it in a way that looks so natural and real.
Well, thank you.
I'm a only if I have to do other lighting kind of gal. So
So
I don't
again,
like
there's
to
no
be
right or wrong.
no, I don't like to be encumbered with the technology. Um,
I
so
I just
that's
recently
my
did a mentor session,
so
right? I mean, I did a mentor session with a girl that said, I'm a natural light photographer. And I said, first of all, don't say that.
right.
And she said, but I am. And I said, no, you don't know how to use flash. There's a difference. If you know how to do both and choose it, it's your style.
Right.
If you don't know how to use it, it's all you know how to do. So same thing, like I could shoot, I have a session later today. If I really wanted to, I could shoot at available light and make it beautiful. I choose not to, but yeah, there's no right
Right.
or wrong.
Yeah. I did weddings for 10 plus years, and you have to use flash on a wedding uh, because lights come from overhead when you're indoors. Uh, so many times they'll set up an outdoor, and the sun is on the other side, and so there's you have to pop in some fill. It's noon. How are you going to find natural light? So I know how to use it. I
Yep.
just, as a kids specialist, I think if I was like you and I did more seniors than anything else, I could absolutely see having that be a really fun way to be able to find more locations without having to first figure out where is the good light. With kids,
Right.
chasing them around with lighting, I find
Oh, it's a night.
challenging. So
I don't do.
that's, yes. Now, and I love when it, I think maybe one, it might be upcoming, but we talked about uh, VAL, voice activated light stand, meaning a person like your husband or the mom.
Yep,
When I've
absolutely.
traveled, and I think it's a cool opportunity, I've found an assistant. Now, like that wedding that I did in Hawaii, I found a wedding photographer to also be a second shooter. But people all over the world want to learn. So if I were doing what you did, I'd try to figure out ways to have student photographers show up and help me. And
So I'm really lucky. My younger daughter is a new esthetician and makeup artist. So like now when I go to Paris,
ah,
my daughter goes along with me and is included in my price because she's the makeup artist.
right,
But then she can also double as my voice activated
light
light
stand.
stand or like just in talks with one of my clients that I'm doing in Paris in the spring. She has a beautiful dress with a train. In that situation, for at least a couple shots, I will probably hold the camera and the flash so my daughter can throw the gown in front of the Eiffel Tower.
Mm,
But yeah, it's always really handy to have somebody else with you.
yeah, yeah. I won this nifty so imagine four sort of triangles stuck together so that they lay flat in your suitcase, but it pops open and you've got a softbox with your strobe. And
Mm-hmm.
and then it's got an easy handle that you can pretty easily hold that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a fun little addition. So yeah, so we can go in either way, right? Whatever, like I don't call myself a natural light photographer, even though 90% of my work is using natural
As
light because it
long as you
usually
know how to
means
control light.
it usually means I know how to go out in the middle of a field on an overcast day and get something decent that I can do a shoot and burn. That's at least the
Mm-hmm.
perception in photographers' minds that have been around a while. So it it yeah, it's anyway, whatever. We're preaching to the choir with with you
We
and
are,
I,
we are.
so we get it. Um, let's see. My actual specific questions, I have um I've reached the end of those. So how do you get work? I'm sure that's what people are thinking. Oh, that's great, but how do I
How do you do it?
how
So
do I
again,
do it?
you sell what you show. So in my studio, I have a very strong presence of destination sessions on my Instagram, on my Facebook. Like it's my clients, if they follow me, they see they see me shooting in destinations all the time. When I'm on a destination session, I always have an autoresponder that says, I'm shooting here. Follow my Instagram to see where I'm shooting. So my clientele or future clientele, if they already follow me, they see that I have shot all over the United States, all over
Mm.
Canada, all over Mexico, Alaska, Hawaii, all over Europe. They're my clients are used to seeing me on location. So I show it, I sell it. I talk about it a lot. So
Mhm.
if a new, again, every year there's brand new seniors that maybe don't follow me. In that very, very first conversation, when I'm explaining my process, I start with it and talk about we can go absolutely anywhere. It's called, your dream model session. What is your dream? What is your dream photo shoot? And I would say for seniors, right off the bat, that first conversation, moms are like, oh, we don't need to go. We don't need to go anywhere. We'll stay local. I would say more than half of my destination sessions start with that. And that's great. We do the conversation, they pay their session fee, we book a local session. Then they come in for their consultation. And then they sit on the couch and they're looking at a huge portrait. And
Mm.
they don't necessarily know she's my daughter, but they're looking at a portrait of a teenage girl in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then right over here is a portrait of a girl in Nashville. And then they have, an album on the table in front of them of a boy in Las Vegas. And now suddenly it's very real.
Mm.
And now they're teenagers like, Mom, what if we go to blah, blah, blah? Or I have another huge portrait in the sales room of a girl in front of the John Hancock in Chicago, which again isn't really a destination for me, but it is for my clients. Now it's real. Now they can see it. And now the kid especially wants it. And kids are kids. They're not really different. People are like, kids are different today. Nope, kids always want to outdo their friends. Kids
Hmm.
have been wanting to outdo their friends since forever.
Right.
And you know what? If there's a mom that's willing to let their kid outdo their friend and pay me to do it, I'm happy to
It's,
help.
it's on like
So
kickoff.
that's how I would say that's how it starts. The
Right.
past 3 years, I've done more work out of my state than in.
Wow.
So it works.
Yes. So I'm imagining that the first thing you did was build a successful business in town.
Correct. Correct.
And that's
Absolutely.
a whole other conversation. Although I know that
Yes, it is.
people could build a destination business, uh, even worldwide, where someone from Paris books you to go to Paris to work for
One
them.
of the 3 sessions that I have in Paris in the spring is a woman who lives in, she's an American woman, but living in Paris.
Right, right.
So
Um,
I think the biggest objection I get when people that say, why wouldn't I just book a French photographer? Why wouldn't I book, a photographer here? I literally will look them in the face and say, do you speak French?
mm,
Which 99% of the time they say, oh, no. And then I point out things like, I'm here. You know how to find me. There's not a
right,
7-hour time difference. Do you want to deal with you couldn't really communicate with this person before or during because of the language barrier, and now you flew home and they're in Paris, and how do you ever get your portraits? How do you
right,
communicate with them?
right, right.
I'm here. You know how to talk to me.
Hmm.
And when you put it like that, then people are like, oh, that makes sense.
Yes. The photographer that my client and I hired to do the wedding in Switzerland, I didn't realize how little English she spoke. And
That makes it so
it
hard.
worked out fine for them. You know, he actually, yeah, I think he spoke German, but yeah, I didn't, because his website was in English. He had it translated. And also I did a ton of research and trying to find a quality photographer who isn't doing just natural light, candid shoot and share. It was difficult. from here.
It's hard.
And I knew what
And
I was looking
I
for.
at least I at least have a healthy distrust because I've heard all the horror stories. Okay, you fly to Paris, take some portraits. You're never going to see that person again. What if they don't send you your images?
Right, right.
You really want to take that chance. And let's face it, things like that happen here with someone in their town. It,
But
it
at
could
least you
very
can
easily
go to
happen
their
across an ocean.
studio or their house and knock on the door and take them
Right.
to small claims court. Yeah. So,
Exactly. If they're across an ocean, you don't have any recourse.
no, no. Well,
So
I love this conversation. And if I were um, still your age, I'm a wee bit older, I still had the energy because I love to travel myself as well. I could see actually making it even more of a thing. And I love how you've built the kind of business and smart marketing and follow through and all the things so that you're able to do this dream experience for yourself and your clients. I mean, my gosh,
it's
I
the
was
greatest
happy
job in
with,
the world.
yeah, yeah, what's not to love? Um, so I have, first of all, maybe I have three questions for you. Um, let's see. One is, how do people get in touch with you? And if they have questions or they want to uh, book you to travel somewhere,
Are you talking about other photographers
other
or just
photographers.
the general public?
No.
So, I mean, you can email me. All of my contact information is in my Instagram bio, which is at Watrous Photography. It's WATROUS
Okay.
Photography. They can look me up on Facebook. They can send me a friend request.
Okay.
Call me. I'll go anywhere
Oh,
you want.
so I know that you are speaking and working on your PPA craftsman degree. So I'm assuming if people are listening that are in charge of booking speakers for their local or state community, or just want to tell the person in charge of that, hey, get this Denise
Oh,
Watrous
I
person.
need three
You're,
more.
pardon?
I need three more. Call me.
Three more, three more. Yeah, I need
Three
to get
more.
my people to
And
have
I
you come to
actually
San
like
Diego.
I just did a presentation at PPO's Arcs last month, and I talk about all of this, but much more in depth. And then I have like the second half of the discussion is when I see everybody, like I say one thing and literally everybody goes, oh, and starts writing. So I show a couple different um, websites and apps that I use to really, really help extensively with the destination portrait session if you've never been somewhere.
Hmm.
And I wish I could show you here, but it's not something that I can like share my screen and show you.
Hmm.
Game changer, or even just using in your town too. But if you're going to shoot all over the world, you have to have it.
Mm.
So I would love to share that with everybody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So last question is just the opportunity for you to either share something that you might think, oh, I wish I had mentioned that, or just your parting thought to leave us with.
Oh wow, that's really, what do I want to say? I think the thing that I really want to share with photographers is, what is your dream job? What, like, my husband said to me one time, we were talking about where are we going to go on vacation this year? And he said, where do you want to go? And I said, everywhere.
Hmm.
I want to go everywhere. And then I said, maybe not Detroit. I don't need to go to Detroit, but I want, I want to go everywhere. And when I set out, when I started, once I saw that like the destination thing could be real and I could make money doing what I want to do, it was like, that's my dream job.
Hmm.
So what is your and maybe someone's dream job isn't to travel because like, well, I can't comprehend it. I know there's people that don't like to travel. But what is your dream job and how do you make that happen?
Got it.
Like I don't think enough people They get in, I'm going to be a photographer. I want to be a photographer. But what about photography? Like, what do you want to do with it? Like, what means something to you? How do you make that happen?
Hmm.
So that's what I want people to think about. How do
Yeah,
you make your dream career?
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Denise. I'm so happy that we connected,
Thank
and
you for having
this
me.
was it's Monday for us when we're recording. And so you've given me a good energetic start to my week. And
Well, I hope so. And
yeah,
see, now everybody can think about where they want to do a portrait session
right,
and then
right.
call me.
Yes. Now, for me, um, I at least one thing that I fully accomplished is that I made enough money in my business that I could travel wherever I wanted to without having to work. And been to Europe, I don't know, maybe 4 times, and usually we'll go for a month, and you know, different places around the country and around the world. So it's like I worked in the airport for my first like really big job, and my mom kept wanting me to get a job with the airlines so she could
The travel.
travel free, and also so I could travel free. And I always said, I just want to work where I make enough money that I can pay to go somewhere. So
Right.
that's been so far. I mean, to me, my trip to Hawaii, um, it was the first half was just exhausting. So even though I was in Hawaii, I was working. So it wasn't until the second half when they were gone and I planned an extra week that I fully was able to relax into
Right.
vacation mode.
And
But
that, yeah, traveling with your gear is not necessarily fun.
no,
And and I get it, like the travel for, a client or being with a client in a destination, it's definitely not for everyone. But I had found myself traveling before this really started in so many places where I would say I would do anything to have a girl in a gown right here, or
yes,
I would kill to have
absolutely.
a family right here. That I knew for me, that was the art that I wanted to create.
Mhm.
And I just kind of slowly set about making that happen. And
Right.
now that's my reading.
Yeah.
So
And that's what you and I have in common, is we love those locations and putting people in them. My first trip to
love it.
Europe, most of my best photos were ones where, yes, this was the beautiful fountain and cathedral, but there was this little boy in a red sweater running around it, and I caught just a great image of him, marching like a little general, and or this beautiful river, and there was a little girl in a red sweater. I think I must look for red sweaters, and she was standing throwing things in the river. And yes, I took pictures of the river without her, but having a person in there adds so much life
Just
to
better.
me. And that's where I have a lot of friends who do travel photography, and they're not putting people in and they're beautiful, but my heart, and it sounds like your heart, is like, okay, let's have somebody experiencing this. So I
The
love
mountains are
it.
beautiful, but with a couple in a gorgeous red dress,
Oh my gosh.
way
Yeah.
better.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to remind people to stay tuned because I will be doing a quickie wrap up after I say a fond goodbye to Ms. Denise. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so excited to share this with my community, and I'll be dreaming of
Thank you for having me.
travel.
I had such a
You're welcome. Okay, how do I pause? I forgot how to pause. It's not showing up. There it is. Okay. Thanks, Denise.